Hello again. You are joining us, Elevate Worcester Education Collaborative podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Herring. Today we have a special treat. We have two guests with us. First, we have Isiah Tucker. And we have Lisa Maddox. And so we're so excited to hear from them and the work that they're doing in the music and healing space in the city of Worcester. So I'd like to start with having each of you talk about a little bit more about yourselves and what got you passionate about the work that you currently do. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's a blessing to be here. It's good to see you again. Obviously good to be here with Lisa as well. So just a little bit about me professionally. So I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. So I've been doing this work for a little over 20 years, kind of losing count here.
Awesome.
But when I say this work, I mean community-based work, working with teens and their parents. And on a personal level, I'm a father. My son is 13, so we get a lot of that teen energy in the house.
Nice.
I'm a lover of all things hip hop, so that's a big part of IVOC as well, which we can talk about later. So I love everything that hip hop provides, like the elements of hip hop, self-expression, things like that. Lastly, I'm a man of God. Faith is a big part of my world, so I'll just stop there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. We're so excited to have you. And Lisa, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
So I am a native of Worcester, born and raised, went to the public schools in Worcester. And what got me excited about getting into mental health and community work, it started when I attended the Broader Horizon, the Upward Bound program at Worcester State University. And it's a pre-collegiate program for students of color who are first generation and want to go on to college. So through that experience and having all those mentors of color, that was the first time that I've had exposure to teachers of color. And, the support that I received through that program, I wanted to give back to the community. So I went through that program, graduated to Worcester State, worked for the program, the Upward Bound program, and that started my trajectory in working with youth around mental health and social emotional learning. So, I just find it rewarding to see kids elevate from, where they started into seeing them, realize their dreams and be successful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'd love to hear more, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear more about IVOC. What is your mission? What's your vision? And why do you do the work that you do?
Yeah, so our mission at IVOC is to create space for kids to communicate how they feel creatively. So we use music, videography, and photography as those outlets for our kids to do that. We focus a lot on pulling up and going to where the kids are. So literally meeting them where they are at. So that might look like schools, group homes, juvenile detention centers. We bring a lot of ourselves and our equipment to them.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. And so what are some connections? I heard Lisa, you had mentioned your personal school experience, and Isiah, I know you do work at the high school level in Worcester Public Schools. What are some connections that you want our audience to know that bring value to the Worcester Public School system and the student experience as a whole?
So Multicultural Wellness Center has worked hand in hand with the Worcester Public Schools. So we started as a mental health referral source where they would refer students who needed mental health support outside of the traditional school sets. And then we were able to get a contract to provide mental health services within the school.
Okay.
And
awesome.
we were placed in an alternative school school within the district. And we did see real change with the students because they were receiving services from people that looked like them, people that understood their cultural beliefs, their cultural backgrounds. And so, you know, that's the strength of multicultural wellness, is that we provide culture-centered mental wellness services to diverse populations within the Worcester community and beyond. And in addition, we also provide a youth program, which we partner with IVOC, called the Broader and New Horizons program. And our focus is providing youth an opportunity to build their self or social emotional learning core competencies, and put it within a cultural context so that they can relate to those competencies and to utilize those strategies in everyday life.
Awesome. And so if you could share with us, why does mental health matter? Why is it important to do this social emotional learning work with kids as young as, teenage or even middle school?
Yeah, I think it's vital, right? So when we talk about kind of the time we're living in, there's a lot going on, a lot of distractions. You know, before we got on the show, we were talking about the distractions on our phone and just different things. So it's important for our kids to understand how to navigate that and how it can impact us. And the difference between, so we try and teach them difference between like a clinical diagnosis of like anxiety or depression and then what we all just deal with day to day. So normalizing some things, giving them some language to help kind of define where they're at, and then also some language to help communicate, you know, what are they actually feeling? And bridging the gap between some of the sort of traditional modalities of mental health services and, like she said, sort of more culturally relevant, competent services.
And so I'm interested to hear more about how you translate what you just said into music and artistic expression. Either one of you can answer.
Okay. So this is what I love, right? So so music for us, we talk to the kids a lot about it's like a universal language, right? So there's lyrics. So we can get the literal sort of feedback from an artist or feeling based on lyrics. But we also talk about the beats and the instrumentals. So how do we use that to communicate how we feel and then identify how we feel, but also like regulate our system, whether that's creating a beat or listening to a beat. And then lastly, there's the storytelling, right? So the autonomy and the cathartic process of being able to tell your own story. I mean, naturally, we all know teens, a lot of times, I won't generalize that much, but a lot of times they feel unheard or misunderstood. So music is that outlet for them to really say, no, this is how I feel today, right now, in real time. And then that, that brings us to a more grounded space. So we're now understanding you and you're understanding us, and we can use music to communicate.
Yeah. Can you talk more about what you're seeing as far as not just mental health, but kind of traumatic experiences, not necessarily specific scenarios in students, but one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation today is that WEC will be hosting our WUSA Summit later on this month. And so part of that is talking about the impact of trauma and adverse childhood experiences on students and how that impacts their ability to access their learning in school. So can you share with us any connections you've seen to kind of adverse experiences with students, and what are some moments that you can see your work illuminating that for students and making it more feasible for them to engage in their schooling?
Yeah, so I think about safety. I think about how music allows a lot of our kids to feel safe and understanding how to access that. Right. So if we're in school and we're walking around and our kids are being triggered by things, how do we bring them back down to this base level where they need to be so they can then learn, be educated, be supported, when obviously when we're triggered, everything is on alert. And so we're teaching them how that goes for all of us, no matter what color, what skin color, race, ethnicity, gender. And again, how we can allow them to get the language. What does triggered really mean?
Sure.
What is trauma for real?
Yeah.
And so we incorporate these elements to help them feel safe, you know, to have some autonomy and have the language to communicate, oh, right now I am feeling triggered. Sure. This teacher said this, or this kid texted me this.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I love that answer. What about you, Lisa? Any things that you've noticed in your field?
I think it's a easier medium for them to be able to express themselves without feeling vulnerable, because you know, the therapeutic process, you know, you're vulnerable because you're disclosing your innermost insecurities or, you know, issues that you're going through. So like utilizing music as a coping mechanism to be able to express the feelings and emotions that you have, you know, is one of the greatest ways to reach youth, because, you know, a lot of youth connect with the lyrics of a lot of artists, and can relate to some of the themes that go through the music, because we know that music is based off of experiences, life experiences, both through childhood and adulthood. So it is a great medium to help youth be able to express themselves.
Awesome. I love that you talked about triggers, trauma. I also thinking about what must the physical environment look like. You mentioned safety, Isiah, right? Yes. So when we return from our break, we're going to talk more about physical safety, what that looks like, and how educators and caregivers can foster a physically safe environment that's safe for students to learn. Okay, we'll be right back. You are watching Elevate Worcester with Worcester Education Collaborative. We will see you in a moment.
Unity Radio. Worcester, we've got you.
Hi, I'm Storm, and I'm a part of the Bruce Wells Scholars Upward Bound program. The Upward Bound program is a program that helps many promising low-income, first-generation, college-bound Worcester High School students. After joining this program, I've learned many different and important life skills while making new connections and getting real-world experiences through internships and classes. If you're interested in any of these opportunities, you can find more information at www.sevenhills.org or 617-866-1293. That's www.sevenhills.org or 617-866-1293. A brighter future begins with you.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Q, host of the Woo 508. I'm here with
your girl Liza, Miss Consistency.
And it's your girl Chantel in the building.
Yes, y'all. Go ahead and follow us everywhere. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, the Woo 508. That's THEWOO 508. Woo!
Roll me a skin, roll me a bone, step into the groove, now you're in a zone.
Tune into the Sustaining Life with Susan Hewlett, and together we will find our way to a healthier, healing lifestyle by listening to empowering stories of overcoming our struggles. Join me, Susan Hewlett, on the Sustaining Life every Wednesday from 5 to 6 on Unity Radio 97.9 FM, Worcester's Community Connection. See you soon.
Recreation Worcester is a free year-round program for youth run by the City of Worcester. The program enriches this city's youth in athletics, arts, academics, and social-emotional learning activities. Food is provided for free of charge for all youth participating in the program. Learn more at the Worcester Recreation website, www.worcesterma.gov/recreation-worcester. That's www.worcesterma.gov/recreation-worcester.
What's up, Central Mass? This is Angelo Gray, and we want to thank you for all your support. And you're listening to Unity Radio 97.9 Worcester's community connection.
And we're back. You're watching Unity Radio 97.9. We are Worcester Education Collaborative, Elevate Worcester podcast. Today we have with us Isiah Tucker and Lisa Maddox talking about the importance of mental health awareness and healing through the arts and creative work. So we started out by sharing personal stories and the reason behind the work that both of you do. One thing that you all mentioned earlier in our conversation was trauma, triggers, and safety. And so I was wondering if we could dive in a little bit more about how to create physical safety for students to want to engage in their learning. But then how do we also help students to recognize their own trigger responses and traumas based on their past, right? So, yeah.
You want to talk a little about that?
Yeah. So what we do with the broader New Horizons program in terms of teaching youth about like to really focus on, what is a trigger? And then we talk about, what in your environment do you identify as being something as a trigger and creates either a physical response or an emotional response. And then we talk about what ways they could change the environment so that it becomes less triggering. So that could be, not being around certain people. That could be not going to certain places. That could be, like removing yourself from places. So, we do a lot of skill building. We do a lot of reflection, conversations around their experiences. Even like if they have an experience at school, we have them recreate it. Then, we have some talk, we introduce some skills, then we do the recreation again with them utilizing the skills, because it isn't just introducing the skills, but it's also giving them an opportunity to practice the skills so that it can be instilled in them.
Love that. Awesome.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Lisa's saying. We do a little bit of that as well at IVOC with our kids. Just to add, we try and give them a lot of autonomy. So we know that the space that they're in, they have to co-design with us. So even though, we might have a certain lighting, we're asking them, if we have LED lights, like what color, right? Sure. We're asking them, where do they feel safe and what's in the space physically, right? Like you're saying, physically, if it's your bedroom, what is in there? Also, we do these exercises around like body scanning. So around, if we're playing a certain song, we get them to tap into like, how do you feel right now? If you feel safe, this is what safe feels like, right? If it's different than this, then that might be triggered by something, right? And just prompting them to pay attention to the different parts of their body physically that might be activated. And we try and normalize it and say like, we all get triggered every single day. It's going to happen. It's not like you're flawed or defective or anything like that. So again, like helping them understand what triggered actually means, like Lisa said. And so what do we do when we are activated, when we are triggered? There's tons of things we can do with music, like I mentioned before. So that's kind of how we try and create a safe space and help them understand how they can create their safe space. And the last thing I'll mention, which Lisa kind of touched upon too, is if you're in a physical space that you don't feel safe, there's ways to access that through like grounding practices. People kind of joke around and say, go to your happy place. But we say, for real, you can actually do that. You can find some safety, temporarily get grounded, and then you can think critically about, what do I need to do? Who do I need to call? How can I get into a more safer environment?
I love that.
And one of the things that we also help our youth do is to develop a toolbox, so that they can have pre-planned grounding practices that they would utilize in those situations where they have been triggered or where they feel stress, so that they know that they can utilize that practice to ground them in those situations.
Can you share examples? So for our parents and caregivers, or even our educators in the audience, can you share some examples of what, how to identify if a student or a child is triggered? Like what might they see? What might they hear? What behaviors might students be exhibiting? What does a trigger look like for an adult to be able to observe it, or maybe preemptively anticipate it and support it?
I think one of the triggers is especially for teens, is feeling disrespected, or not being heard. Like they try to explain, something from their perspective, and they shut down from being able to explain that. So then, they go and they try to explain it, but they're being told, no, we don't want to hear your side of the story. You need to listen to me. So then that manifests into anger. And in order for the youth to be heard, their voices raise up higher, or it could be, someone going into a youth's space, especially when they say, don't get closer, and somebody comes into their space. That could be another trigger as well. And so, you see the changes, you see the raising of the voice. Some you might see move back and withdraw. And, a lot of times, when kids are in that space, sometimes, if they don't have programs like ours to learn those strategies, then it escalates, especially in school environment, into a situation where they get sent to the office.
Of course.
And it's a disciplinary action that doesn't really address the issue, but for some, just getting that child out of that space is what they feel is addressing the issue.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anything come to mind for you, Isiah?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Lisa said. I think about some of our kids that tend to isolate, or kind of like shut down, any kind of abrupt shift. Also, what Lisa said about when sometimes our kids are angry and they raise their voice. I always talk to kids and parents about this. You can tell when someone is reacting differently than you would sort of assume, right?
Course,
like I use the example of if we're all kind of together hanging out and someone like bumps into me and I'm like ready to fight, I'm triggered. You guys are like, bro, he wasn't even, it wasn't that serious, but I'm so we can kind of see it. And like Lisa said, it's so important to just kind of name it, whenever the time is appropriate, but name it and help the kids process what happened there. They might not even recognize it. Might be just their MO or what they've observed, like all the things. So long-winded way of saying, I think it's fairly noticeable. It's usually an abrupt shift. It's isolating, kind of shutting down. Sometimes we notice there's a lot of deep breathing or huffing and puffing going on. Some of those physical reactions are pretty noticeable. Thank you.
Now, what about what I haven't heard yet as much is the nonverbal cues, right? Can you talk to us about the importance, especially as parents, caregivers, educators? Talk to us some more about, our nonverbal body language.
I was laughing because I'm thinking of my son.
Me too.
This boy, and he's just like I was when I was his age. But yes, that again, the deep breathing, the huffing and puffing. Sometimes he'll go on his phone and just automatically pull out the phone. I'll be like, hold on, what you need is not on the phone. It's right here, right? So some of those nonverbals, I kind of notice naturally now as a dad.
Just physically seeing them shut down completely. Just shutting down, withdrawing from the conversation, when you ask questions, you know, one word answer, no elaboration of what is bothering them, or them just say, never mind, forget it.
Yeah.
You know, so that is, you know, sometimes, you know, they just withdraw from that experience and just don't want to be bothered, don't want to resolve it, just want it to go away.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Lisa, to your point, something that comes to mind for me, not just with nonverbal body language, but even tone. Like that's big in my house. You know, it's like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that's something that I'm working on, you know, with my kids too. Is like, there's nothing wrong with what you said technically, but did you hear how you said it and how that could have landed? And I think that's so important for us as adults in children's lives to make sure that, you know, we're human, we make mistakes, of course, but to be intentional about how would it land if I said it this way versus that way, right? So,
and sometimes using, like, you know, when a youth like may talk to you in a disrespectful tone, you, whoa, wait a minute, you know, I'm gonna need you to kind of use different words, to express what it is that, you know, is bothering you, because the way that you're coming at me, you know, I don't appreciate that, or I can't hear you when you talk to me like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely important to model the work that we're doing for students and our own expectations with how people interact with us as well.
I have another quick thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because it's just like literally what we're trying to teach our kids at IVOC. So, so if they don't have the language, you know, if they verbally can't articulate it, we always say there's so many different ways. I mean, so we try and get them to introduce music. Like if there is a song that highlights how you feel, you know, tell your parents, show your parents, play it for your parents. You guys can break down the song. Again, instrumental, anything like that. And, you know, giving them a little bit of wiggle room with like just saying, hey, I need a break. I need, Mom or Dad, can I have 5 minutes? Being able to say that versus just the huffing and puffing and things like that. So
yeah, and to that point, something that I've learned or been reflecting on is my own childhood and upbringing, right, compared to my kids. And so I didn't necessarily have the ability to talk back, but I'm like, okay. We're living in different times. You know, we want to be more aware. And so something I noticed my son does when he gets frustrated is, you know, you can hear him talking to himself in his room, right? And so I'm like, okay, picking my battles. He's not harming himself. He's not harming another human. He's talking to himself about his frustration of how unfair he feels, whatever is. And so even that can make a big difference, is giving kids space to just let it out in a safe and productive way, I think is important. So when we come back in our next segment, we're going to discuss culture and the importance of doing this work through the lens of culturally responsiveness and inclusion. So you are watching Unity Radio 97.9, Worcester Education Collaborative, Elevate Worcester. We will be right back.
Hello, my name is Alvin Familia, president of the Manny 267 Foundation, and you are listening to Unity Radio 97.9 FM, Worcester Community Connection.
Everyone has a community, a neighborhood, school, place of worship, or other chosen groups. Communities can provide support when you need it, including helping your kids avoid underage drinking and other substance use. Learn more at talktheyhearyou.samhsa.gov.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Myers, your host on Talking Wellness, presented by the Kiva Centers on Unity Radio 97.9 FM. As a licensed mental health professional and leader in the field, I believe every story matters and healing starts with being heard. Whether you're navigating life's challenges or lifting others through theirs, I'm here to explore the paths of mental health, recovery, and wholeness. Tune into Talking Wellness on Unity Radio 97.9 FM every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. for honest conversation and inspiration. This program is sponsored by the Kiva Centers, a statewide leader in peer-led support and recovery services. From Worcester to Western Mass, Kiva is lighting the way forward. Talking Wellness, every voice, every journey. Speak up, be heard, and of course, Be well.
Life is like a roller coaster. It has its high and low moments, zooming through our lives. Sometimes we feel excited and full of joy, and other times we feel numb to the world around us. Low moments are a part of life. They help us cherish the good times. That's why it's important to reach out when life's lows stop us in our tracks. Connect with someone now. Call 211 or text 988.
Support for Unity Radio 97.9 FM is provided by Ruth H. and Warren A. Ellsworth Foundation, established in 1964, focusing on education, social services, and youth aid, and the Mildred H. McAvoy Foundation, giving primarily to health, educational, cultural, and human service organization. Unity Radio, Worcester's community connection.
What's up, Worcester? It's your boy AG, better known as Angelo Gray. And you're listening to Unity Radio 97.9, Worcester's community connection.
And we're back with Elevate Worcester on Unity Radio. We are here with our guests, Isiah Tucker and Lisa Maddox. We are here today talking about the importance of mental health, trauma, healing, and expression through the arts. So earlier we talked about what got you excited about the work. We also talked a little bit more about triggers and how to identify that and how to prevent that if possible. So now I'd like to pivot our conversation more towards being culturally responsive. Why is that important? And what are you seeing as far as your field? And what are some things that our audience should know about the importance of culturally responsive healing work in our city?
So we look at culture as a protective factor. You know, the way that we relate to what's going on in the world is through the lens of our worldview, which is shaped by our cultural experiences. So, you know, talking about going to therapy or anything related to therapeutic work, a lot of times our populations that look like us, come from various cultural backgrounds, are very reluctant to go into those services because, one, the provider doesn't look like them. Two, the having to tell the story over again, and maybe the provider doesn't understand or doesn't have the perspective to understand it, can be another traumatic experience for them. And then sometimes too, when there's a cultural mismatch, sometimes the provider's own biases can affect the relationship between the person that's coming for the service and the provider. So when you open the services to incorporate culture as a protective factor, one, it helps to establish the relationship between the provider and the client. And then it also gives validation, because a lot of times when, people of color have, like emotional, issues that are going on, and they go to people and they try to explain it or they try to tell it, and they're not validated in what they're feeling, or they're told, oh, it'll pass, or, oh, I think you're over exaggerating, but the therapeutic process, you have to have some validation. You have to be able to see yourself in that process. And it isn't the therapist or the provider telling you what to do, but it's to help you develop where you need to go and what you need to do in a context that complements your cultural beliefs and your lifestyle.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. No, that's spot on. I mean, so kind of what I hear you saying too is how like this mental health or mental wellness system can really create more trauma, you know,
Mhm.
for some of us Black and brown folks, right? So if we don't come with that approach, you know, the lack of validation, it essentially creates a horrible, you know, traumatic experience, especially when we're in crisis mode. That's really hard. So with IVOC, similar to what Lisa said, like I said before, we love to meet the kids where they're at.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're really intentional with saying to them, you know, teach us about yourself, teach us about your culture, your background. Even if you are African American, what does that mean to you? You know, what are the traditions? And then again, really intentional with helping them communicate that in a broader sense, understand it for themselves and feel confident in that. You know, there's no shame in who you are, you know, who your ancestors are, who where your family's from. And so we try and kind of help that come to life, so to speak. And again, that helps with the safe space that we talked about before. So when we're in schools, they might have really bad experiences in the school, and so we're trying to help them say, even though we're in this building, the space that we're creating is different, right? And they have true autonomy and power in that through, you know, educating us, being vulnerable a little bit, and telling us a little bit about themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we think about cultural norms or cultural historical ways of expressing ourselves and healing, for lack of a better word, what are some things that come to mind? Are there any practices or any best practices that you want us to be aware of that you'd like to share?
So like for us, our programs, one of the things that we like to do is we like to have the youth as well as adults identify the 3 top social identities that they most relate to. And then we talk about, you know, what about those 3 identities show up in your life the most. So we have that conversation, you know, and they talk about like their experiences. They talk about, you know, like say, for instance, those social identities are religion, race, ethnicity, age, you know, a variety of so how people show up in the world, and based on those experiences, whether it's a negative experience, whether it's a positive experience. Sometimes, you know, if they are like, say for instance, it's race, you know, it could be in an environment where they're experiencing microaggressions all the time in certain environments. So that becomes a prominent social identity. So for them, and then, you know, through our programs, helping them to develop strategies to address those issues and not put them in a position that's going to make the situation worse, you know, but for them to be able to have tools in their toolbox to address those issues and for them to feel safe, whether that is addressing it head on right then and there, or giving themselves space and then addressing those issues.
Awesome. What are some techniques that you all practice in your day-to-day work that are not only fun and engaging for kids, but are actually very aligned with clinical practice?
Yeah. So the lyric writing, well, I was saying earlier, excuse me, lyric writing. So in clinical terminology might be called bibliotherapy or narrative therapy, but lyric writing is probably my favorite. You talk about storytelling creatively. I kind of talked about it before, sort of reimagining your future and who you are and being able to really engage in that process. I mean, we also use cognitive behavioral therapy. So we talk about the strength and power and reframing. So reframing your thoughts. You might have an experience and you're only looking at it from one side. How do we look at it from the other and get some strength in that? There's many others, but those are 2 that come to mind.
Sure. So one of the things that we're working on at WEC is increasing our literacy rates for Worcester Public School students. Our data all the research is showing that is a huge need currently. And so can you talk to us about the connections of the work that you do to uplifting and increasing literacy, literacy and just literacy outcomes, or even the love of reading and writing for students?
So we utilize a lot of like scenarios with youth, and we have them develop their own scenarios.
Nice.
And like kind of recreating that and developing solutions. We bring material, cultural relevant materials that speak to their experiences, and then talk about like the concepts in those stories and how they relate to certain characters based off of their own experiences. So we and also to expose them to writers that have those same experiences or come from those their culture or come from different cultures, so that they can also understand different perspectives from other cultures as well.
Yeah, I'll take so it's a kind of a different angle, but around critical thinking.
Yes,
So
important.
So we do a lot of, hey, break down this song.
Yes.
Listen, I'm an old guy. I don't know this language here, right? So kind of giving them that power, if you will, or encouraging them to think critically about what they're hearing. And then also ask questions. So if there's a word you don't understand or anything at all, we try and get them in the habit of thinking like there's no such thing as a dumb question, or like it's okay to not know. This is literally what we're here for in this world, is to explore and be more inquisitive. So we have some workshops we do around critical thinking. We also do a lot around like I said, lyric writing, but also like, how do you not swear in this whole verse? If you're creating a whole verse, how do you not use any vulgarity?
No cussing challenge.
No cussing. Again, let's be creative here. There's a lot of different words. Let's not use the same,
Love that. So thank you so much. So when we come back, we're going to discuss ways that our audience can be involved and collaborate with the both of you and your organizations. So you are listening to, or you may be watching, Unity Radio 97.9 and Worcester Education Collaborative. Elevate Worcester. We will be back.
Hey, this is Ricky Duran, and you're listening to Unity Radio 97.9 FM, Worcester's Community Connection.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Graham Anderson, also known as Positively Suzanne, host of Black in Business, Thursdays at 5 p.m. on Unity Radio 97.9. Black in Business is a series of conversations with influential members of the Black business community. These entrepreneurs knows what it means to risk everything to create successful businesses and spark positive changes in the community. So join us. Again, I'm Suzanne Graham Anderson, also known as Positively Suzanne, right here on Black in Business, Thursdays at 5 p.m. on Unity Radio 97.9, Worcester's Community Connection.
¿Estás al tanto de los nuevos requisitos para reportar beneficiarios finales?
Un poco. ¿De qué se trata?
Es una nueva iniciativa que ayuda a combatir crímenes como lavado de dinero, fraude y tráfico de drogas. Muchos pequeños negocios como los nuestros tienen que reportar información básica al gobierno federal acerca de las personas que son dueños o beneficiarios finales.
Reportar información de beneficiarios finales de su compañía es rápido, seguro y gratis y ayuda a proteger la seguridad nacional de los Estados Unidos. Aprenda más en finson.gov/BOI.
At KivaCenters.org, we believe every story matters and healing starts with being heard. The Kiva Centers are here to explore the paths of mental health, recovery, and wholeness with you. Visit KivaCenters.org, a statewide leader in peer-led support and recovery services, from Worcester to Western Mass. More information is available at KIVACenters.org. Kiva is lighting the way forward.
Tune in to Affirmations with Alex, and together we will affirm our way to a healthier mindset by listening to empowering messages. Hi, I'm Alex from Affirmations with Alex. Join me every Monday through Thursday at 10 p.m. on Unity Radio 97.9 FM, Worcester's Community Connection.
You're listening to Unity 97.9 FM, WUTY, Worcester.
And we're back again. You are watching or listening to Unity Radio 97.9. We are Worcester Education Collaborative, Elevate Worcester, and we are here with Isiah Tucker and Lisa Maddox talking about the importance of mental health, healing, trauma, triggers, and supporting through creative expression. So we want to chat about how we can get involved and engaged with you all and your organizations. Can you share with our audience some services and opportunities to engage that you have upcoming? Lisa, you can go ahead and start.
So at Multicultural Wellness, we provide a number of services for both adults and youth. We provide outpatient therapy. We provide recovery services, as well as what they call CBHI services.
Right.
And we can be reached at our website, www.multiculturalwellness.org. That will tell you more in depth about our services, as well as anyone that's interested in referring themselves or or a family member or individual. There's a referral button right on the page.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so for us at Inner Voice Outer Change, we have two events that I'm really excited about. One is coming up actually this Saturday, April 11th. It's going to be hosted at Quinsigamond Community College. It's called The Exchange, and the theme for this workshop is Y'all Don't Listen. So it's basically an opportunity for our kids. Any kid can come, but we're kind of targeting kids who are in like foster care, group homes, juvenile detention centers, kind of caught up in the systems that are designed to help them. But because they're shuffling around and they have so much going on, we know that they don't often get the time and opportunity to tell us, what are we doing wrong? How are we falling short as a system? So this is a space for them to connect with 15 stakeholders in the city. I know you will be there as well.
I'm so excited.
So the stakeholders are going to have a front row seat and kind of learning, hey, what is going on in your world? How did we fall short, and how can we show up better? So it's a 3-part series. This is the first one. Again, it's April 11th. It's from 11:30 to 2 at Quinsigamond Community College. We're going to have every kid who attends is going to get a $30 gift card to Sneaker Sapphire. I want to give a shout out to Jaden Mark, because he's been instrumental in our help with getting kids into the space. The other event is called our Summer Jump Off. It's our 4th annual event. It's taking place at JMAC right over here. It's going to be on May 17th. And it's from 5 to 7. That's an opportunity for the community to come out and support our kids. They're pretty much showcasing what they've created with us. Usually it's music, it's beat production. Again, it's rapping, it's singing, all these creative ways for our kids to kind of talk about who they are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with the both of you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We very much appreciate your partnership and our collaboration so far. And remember that Worcester Education Collaborative is hosting our first ever WUSA Equity Summit. WUSA stands for Worcester Stories of Adversity and Healing. It'll be held at Worcester Technical High School on Thursday, April 30th from 8:30 to 3. We'll be talking more about the impact of trauma on learning and how we can better support our students of Worcester. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we hope to see you again soon.